How's it going, everybody? Jason here. Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Today I'm taking a look at Schwabe Digital's Gold Clip plugin. So this is a mastering processor, which basically means that it's a loudness saturation processing device, meaning you can make your audio sound louder without it clipping, hence the name Gold Clip. I'm going to focus on probably the coolest feature about this, which is the little gold knob right here. I'll get into what that means in a second. But essentially what this does is it allows you to add gain to your audio signal without getting any distortion or artifacting. Now you can use this as a distortion device. You can use it as a parallel mixer. You can use it to shape your high end as well. But primarily it would be something you would put on your master bus. Okay, quick interface tour. There's an internal bypass button here that will bypass the plugin. And there's a box tone button here, which is a weird name, but basically what this does is it allows you to shape the high-end frequencies above 2K, I believe. I'll double check and put that on screen if I got that wrong. You can set that to flat, which will do nothing. Classic and modern are similar, but not the same. Classic is basically a more gentle version of shaping those high-end frequencies. The clipper here, you can turn it off by hitting Control click on a PC or Command click on a Mac. And there's three settings. There is modern, which is like a soft knee compressor. There is hard, which is like a hard knee compressor, and classic is somewhere in the middle. There's also a little low pass frequency filter here. And basically, if you want more of a clean clipping effect or more aggressive clipping, turn this thing on, otherwise turn it off. The gold button here, this has two settings, classic and modern. Both are modeled after different famous hardware that we're not allowed to say the name of. Otherwise, Beetlejuice or, the Candyman are going to show up in the mirror behind us. And the difference being classic will let you add up to 6 dB of gain, and then modern will let you add up to 2.5 dB of gain. And the best way to describe what those two settings are doing are the charts in the manual. So the classic gold processing, this is the one that's here. So if you're adding up to 6 dB, as you're getting closer to the clip ceiling that you've configured, it's going to start rolling off the gain. That's what prevents it from distorting. So modern is doing the same thing, but with only up to 2.5 dB of gain. Down here on the bottom left, this is going to show you a timestamp of where your maximum clipping is occurring, so you can pay attention to that part of your track and fix it, which is cool. Main interface has your standard stuff, input and outputs, and you can link those together. You're going to really want to focus on the ceiling. They recommend that you leave this at 0, so if you're using this as a mastering processor the way it was intended, leave it at 0. If you're using out individual tracks or buses, set it to however you want for the type of effect that you want. So if you want to introduce distortion, you're probably going to want to lower the clipping level and drive it pretty hard to introduce some distortion. The two knobs here, the gold knob controls how much gain you're adding, and again that will be dependent on which of the settings you pick here on the left. And alchemy, this button will allow you to reduce up to 1 dB for frequencies above 1K. So if you're driving the plugin hard and you're getting some high-end weirdness, you can roll off up to 1 dB of high frequencies. On the right-hand side is your wet-dry controls. You can link those or unlink those as well. And down at the bottom right are your mute buttons, so you could mute the wet signal, the dry signal, or the delta button will let you hear the differences between the input and the output. Last feature is this little unity button, and this is a button that you can turn on or off depending on if you would like your ears to lie to you or not. So basically when you have this thing turned on, your ears won't tell your brain that, hey, this sounds better because it's louder. So it compensates for that in the plugin by automatically adjusting the gain. And I lied about the last setting. The last setting is actually in settings here. So you can turn clip guard on or off. So this will make sure that if you have this on, it will never go above 0. And your oversampling here, you can set your oversampling type. So the main difference with this and a regular compressor or maximizer is this is actually doing the processing based on samples. It's not doing it based on time, like setting your attack and your release in a compressor, for example. It's samples in real time. So you can set these to whatever you want. I'm going to set these things on full, extra pristine, and linear phase, and let's test this thing out. All right, so I've used this on a couple of different tracks. I'm going to make sure I turn all of the other instances of Gold Clip off, and I'm going to just give it a go on my master. So they recommend that you run your audio through a limiter first to make sure it's not peaking over 0 dB. Now this is if you want to use it as a maximizer. Essentially, you don't want the input coming in too hot, so I've got this set to peak at 0 dB, and the only thing really coming through are the occasional snare hits. So let's take a listen to this and see what the limiter's doing first. So that should be good enough. And now let's turn Gold Clip on. So I'm going to put this on classic. I'm going to leave the clipper on modern. I want this setting on. I want this on classic. And I'm going to slowly introduce this. I'm going to keep the wet signal at 100% and introduce the gain, and hopefully you'll hear what this thing's doing. I would definitely recommend you have headphones on as well. Earbuds, probably you'll hear a difference. You'll definitely hear a volume difference on whatever device, but the subtleties of what the plugin is doing, you're not really going to hear unless you've got headphones on. So you could hear what that Unity button was doing. You could hear that it's obviously making it sound a lot quieter, but it makes it more clear what the plugin is actually doing when you turn it on. So I would, for this track, I would probably have, actually I might even switch to modern. So for this particular track, I think it sounds better on modern. I think when I have it set on classic, it is introducing too much distortion, but I can also compensate by either lowering the overall gain input, lowering the input on the actual plugin itself here, and a bunch of other different ways of doing it. So now I'm going to just give this this Alchemy button a whirl, and testing with it off camera, honestly, didn't notice much of a difference at all for what it was doing. So let's just try this. So in headphones, I was listening for the hi-hats, and maybe they sounded a little bit tighter, but I could just be tricking myself. There really wasn't too much of a difference with what this was doing with the high end, and it's probably because I'm not driving the plugin very hard. But as far as a maximizer, it's pretty simple to use. I like the features of the maximum clip settings here, plus the 3 different types, and being able to adjust the overall ceiling so you could use this to create distortion or use it in a more creative way. So what I might end up doing is I'm going to turn this off on my master, and let's just do this on my drums. Okay, so I'm going to keep this on classic. I'm going to keep this on modern, turn Alchemy off, and let's just play with this on the drum bus. So now it might be easier to hear what Alchemy is doing, so listen for the cymbals. So you can hear the snap of the snare, which would be, you know, the snare bottom, basically, the rattles from the snare wires, and the hi-hat. You can hear that dropping a little bit, but it's very, very subtle. It's not very noticeable on the headphones, but you can hear a tiny, tiny little difference. So this might be a case of, if you're using this on multiple tracks or multiple buses, the sum of all that stuff will actually matter more than listening to it on individual tracks. So now that I've done this on my drum bus, now let's go back to the master instance of this and play around. Turn this way down, turn this on. So you can definitely hear a big difference. It's making the drums more prominent. And in this kind of a song, I don't want the drums to be that prominent. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. All right, so final thoughts. First, yes, indeed, we have to talk about the price for this. So I'm just bringing this up in another window. $250 US is like 7 million Canadian, so it is a tough pill to swallow. I will agree that it works great. As far as a clipper, I normally use Wave's Ultra Maximizer, which is not the same, but it's a similar plugin that's going to raise the perceived loudness of your track. So it's going to act as more of a limiter and less of a clipper, depending on how you have it configured. $250 for somebody like me, it would be a no, because that's a lot of money. I think you could accomplish similar with using a couple of other different plugins, maybe using a mix of compressors and a mix of an Ultra Maximizer plus some saturator plugins. You might have to do some creative things with side chaining to deal with some of the higher frequencies and things like that. I would say if you're somebody who is doing your own mastering, I generally use eMastered to run all of my stuff through as some final polish. If you are doing this for lots of other bands, it's your full-time gig, this plugin, I think, makes it faster to get to a polished result than if you were trying to accomplish the same thing with a bunch of other different plugins, like I said, using a maximizer plus a saturator plus some other things. This gets you results so unbelievably quick. When I first got this thing and I put it on my master track, within 2 or 3 minutes, it sounded great, which I think is fantastic. But for me personally, the price is a barrier. But that said, it might be the right thing for you depending on what your circumstances, because it's the quality is there, the settings are easy to use, it does sound great, and you can also use it to create distortion, and you can use it on individual tracks and buses and things like that. So drop a comment or question below if you've got something that you want to know about this plugin. I do have the evaluation for 6 months. Be happy to try some things out and answer them. Otherwise, hit like and subscribe. You'll get notified when new videos come out. Thanks a lot for taking the time to check it out.